I love parenting, and oh my gosh, it is a lot of work. Some days it is really overwhelming, and some weeks are easier than others, and sometimes it just is crazy making. So getting ready to be today's speaker, I think the kids knew there was something in the air that they were crazy making with me. And last night at 2 o'clock in the morning when Joshua wanted to play checkers, I'm like, no, you need to be in bed. But I won, so it was okay. But those who are parents and those who are not, there are so many things that happen in our lives that can make us feel overwhelmed. In fact, I think all of us can acknowledge at some point, we all feel overwhelmed.
All of these faces who don't know what space is. The crowds are shut down, I'm overstimulated. Nobody gets it. They say I'm too sensitive. I can't listen cause I'm eyeing the exits. This mind isn't mine. Who am I to judge? Oh, I should be fine, but it's all too much. I get overwhelmed
so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me feels like I'm somebody else.
I get overwhelmed in my mind late at night, overthinking everything in my life, just wondering if I'm doing anything right. All the demons inside start to really live. Oh my, I get anxious and I don't know why. I can hear my dreams calling me, but all these doubts are haunting me. Oh, why is it when I fell asleep? I get overwhelmed
so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe.
What's come over me? It feels like I'm somebody else. I get overwhelmed
so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me? Feels like I'm somebody else.
I get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed. I should be fine, but it's all too much. I should be fine, but I'm not. I get over, well, would you look at that? Another person telling me that I should just relax, calm down, take it easy, everything will be okay. Yeah, sure, cause that's what they all say. But oh, my mind isn't really my friend. Sometimes I can hear my dreams calling me, but all these doubts are haunting me. Why is it always right before I fall asleep that I get overwhelmed?
So easily, my anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me feels like I'm somebody else.
I get overwhelmed
so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me feels like I'm somebody else.
I get overwhelmed
so easily. My anxiety creeps inside of me, makes it hard to breathe. What's come over me feels like I'm somebody else.
I get overwhelmed.
Thank you, Ryan. Those feelings of being overwhelmed are difficult, and often they're made more difficult by keeping them to ourselves and by isolating inside of that sense of overwhelm. Now, I acknowledge we're gonna go some tough places for a few minutes here. It does get better. This is a message of hope, but in order to get there, we're gonna go a little bit through the journey. And so if anything that gets shared in today's service is triggering to you, and for those who are joining us online, we have posted here on the slide the 2 best resource numbers to know. 988, which is a national number for people who are in crisis, or 741-741, which is the crisis text line that I volunteer for. If you just look at a phone, it's the left side up twice, 741-741. Whether you call 988 or text 741-741, there's somebody there that can listen. You don't have to hold on to this in silence. And I promise you, the message is going to go to a message of hope. Now, you have seen the 5 steps of manifestation that Ken has presented over the last 5 weeks. And I didn't quite pick up when he invited me to speak today, he was going to be wiped out after 5 Sundays in a row, and that I was the comic entertainment or like the cracker you eat at the wine tasting after you finish one before you go to the next one. But as I sat through last Sunday's service, I was like, this is what I have lived in my recovery. And particularly as he talked about, like, you name and claim you're good. You shift your consciousness. You take concrete steps. I'm going to look at some of those today. But you share your journey and you be open. And that's the risk that I'm going to take today in a way that I have not done before. Now, as I prepared for today's talk, I thought of people who have heard me speak several times at Unity San Francisco on mental health and my own journey, and some people who have never heard this before. And I was like, how do I bridge all of that together? And I'm also in the midst of writing a book about my journey. Okay, let's be real. I've been in the midst of writing a book since longer than Ken and I have been together. When he called me, that became our first date. We were friends, but we hadn't dated yet. I was actually in Colorado working on a draft of the book. But I've gotten further with it, and part of how I've gotten further is I've brought some other people in this year. I have 2 collaborators that have worked with me on the writing. I'm just going to share less than 1,000 words of what is probably about a 50,000-word book about my journey, but I think it captures the darkness of the overwhelm that I was in. And so with your permission, I'll share a little bit of chapter 1. For much of my life, I've lived between 2 extremes: success and destruction, sobriety and drunkenness, closeted and flamboyant, reckless and responsible. But on that day, Wednesday, June 11th, 2003, was the extreme of all extremes. I had some coveted Manhattan real estate on the market, but I was desperate to hide how far behind I was on the mortgage and the maintenance and co-op fees. I had a new job in one place at NYU, but I was sneaking into another place at NYU to smoke crack all night long. My dad thought everything was going to be fine. He was waiting for me in Wichita, where I was going to fly to meet him that afternoon. I wouldn't be making it to Wichita that day or anytime soon. However, because nothing was fine. I don't recall how I spent the morning of June 11th, but I was not on an airport-bound train. At some point, I called my dad and told him I'd missed the first flight out, but was still coming. I promised to let him know which flight I'd be on and that I'd make our evening plans. By lunchtime, I found myself just off Union Square, sitting in a bar that I'd never been in before or since, called The Link. I chummed up with a bartender who had a very light crowd, and I started drinking white wine, masking my bleak interior with breezy conversation. After 3 or 4 glasses, I made a decision. The pain had just become too great to face. I'd started attending AA meetings 25 years earlier when I was just in the 8th grade, but I was never going to win this battle against addiction. I had 2 signed contracts, one for a full-time teaching job at NYU and another to sell my apartment, which would put hundreds of thousands of much-needed dollars in my pocket. But neither prospect could lighten the weight of my hopelessness. I sat at the Link, working to replace the crack in my system with alcohol. My habits in those days were much like a nail file. I was always either taking off an edge or putting on an edge. And as I sat there drinking, I came up with a plan for my death. I could not bear for my family to learn of the extent of my pain or for the veneer of my success I'd built so carefully to crumble. So I'd stage it as an accident. I'd trip and fall into an oncoming subway train. It would be gruesome, but with the 2 recent contracts, nobody would have guessed that my death had been self-inflicted. Nobody would have to know that what I'd really been going through. To complete the ruse, I took out my journal and wrote this final entry. June 11th, 2003. I depart for Kansas after 3 days in New York, a good but hurried trip. I'm blessed with so many good friends and great opportunities. Life is good. It is what we say it is. Can't wait to start teaching at NYU. What a blast that will be. I know now that I belong in New York. Rereading that now, I can see that I wasn't even able to pretend that I was okay with my disappointments. I was trying a little too hard with the exclamation points in my writing. It doesn't even sound like me. I've never been much of an exclamation point guy, more of an ellipsis sort of guy. I finished my final glass of wine and it was time. I'd amassed a small tab, which I had no way to pay. And I asked the bartender if he'd mind watching my luggage and my phone while I headed to the nearest ATM. So I set out from the bar, broke, drunk, still a little high, numb, and hopeless. First, I entered the subway system, jumping the turnstile at Union Square. I watched train after train whir past me as I studied when and how I should try to fall. After studying the situation for a time, I could see this wasn't the right place for my final act. I thought of everyone behind me on the platform and of the subway driver. This would be a violent, bloody conclusion. Did they deserve to play a part in that? Was my pain so bad that it should involve others? So my plan shifted. Where could I go for solitude and suicide? I decided rather impetuously to go to the Manhattan Bridge. I'd been riding around the city all afternoon, thinking about death, but not once had I considered anything as dramatic as a leap from the bridge. Now suddenly, it seemed like the answer. It was nearing sunset, and I climbed out on the subway, as I climbed out of the subway system at what I thought was the stop nearest the bridge. Now that I'd abandoned my plans to stage an accident, I felt I needed to leave a note for my dad. I walked in and out of a handful of shops in Chinatown trying to get pen and paper, but I was penniless at this point. Finally, I saw a branch of my bank. I realized I could write a note on the back of a deposit slip and deposit it into my account. It would be morning before the employees emptied the overnight deposits, and by then I'd be gone. I entered the vestibule and tearfully wrote an apology to my father for what I was about to do. Somehow it seemed poetic to deposit the evidence of my bankrupt life into a bankrupt bank account. I left the lobby now in a stupor. I'd been up all night, and all I'd had to eat that day was several glasses of wine and a little bit of salad. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't feeling. I was merely walking through my final efforts. I got my bearings and headed for the bridge. I climbed along the jogging path, making my way among the pedestrians who were out enjoying the warm June evening. I took my time, moving slowly, gradually making my way over the East River. The sun set behind the city's skyline, and the lights on the bridge came on. I kept climbing. It grew darker. I found a place on the bridge near the center where one of the streetlights was out. I paused. I prayed. My connection to God had been tenuous for the previous several months, but now I asked him to forgive me for what I was about to do. I'd been taught that what I was about to do was wrong, but I was so consumed with the pain that I saw no other option. I hoped God would understand. I felt the presence of my mom, who died in my arms just about a year earlier, and my older brother, Vic, who died before I was born, and whose absence shaped a lot of my childhood. Whether this was a true spiritual experience of angelic intercession or just the games that my mind was playing on me, I don't know. They seemed to be welcoming me, embracing me, promising an end to my pain. I climbed to the top of the fence that's there to prevent acts like this, and I looked down at the water hundreds of feet below me. I panicked and climbed back down, unable to continue, and I sat in a fetal position away from the edge of the fence, and I listened to the cars and the trucks and the subway trains passing on the bridge behind me. There was nobody walking on the path anymore. I was alone. Then my resolve returned to me, and without further hesitation, I climbed and I leapt. I said this is a story of hope, and obviously I'm standing here in front of you. Spoiler alert, I did jump, but I failed at ending my life. Thank goodness I failed. And that night, June 11th, became the turning point for me that allowed me to step into living a life of joy and of hope and of opportunity. That's what I want to share with you now. And that journey from darkness to light, from hopelessness to hope, if my being uncomfortable and sharing that with all of you and writing about it and eventually publishing it makes it that somebody doesn't have to make the mistakes I did, then it is all worth it to be able to share. As we go to this, let me start with a quote by Maya Angelou. And those who are new to the Unity San Francisco community, Maya Angelou sat in these pews. Well, okay, not these pews, 3 churches ago, 3 buildings ago, the pews that we had. And I love what she said. If you must look back, do so forgivingly, as David talked earlier. If you must look forward, do so prayerfully. However, it's the wisest thing you can do is to be present in the present, gratefully. And so in that moment of presence, in that moment of gratitude, I am honored to be able to share with you some of the ways that I had a return to sanity, some of the ways that I was able to return. I asked David to have what he reflected on Yom Kippur, and I just want to reread one line of this. Not because we are broken or in need of fixing, but because our soul yearns to return to the awareness of our oneness with God. In the Rooms of 12-step, the first step is admitting your powerlessness. But the second step is the one I want to talk about, and that's where the title of today's talk came from. I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Restore us to sanity. When I entered recovery, really entered recovery in 2003, I couldn't figure out where that sanity was that I was supposed to go back to. I had lived so many years as an insane life, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result out of it. And so I had to go really far back to get that return to sanity, that restoration of sanity. But it was possible. And it was possible because of a number of the things that I learned in the Rooms of Recovery. Now, I want to acknowledge that I am open about the path I trod with recovery, and I fully respect that the second A in Alcoholics Anonymous is anonymous, and I never violate someone else's anonymity, but I am sharing about my own journey today because I don't think the silence is good for me, especially around mental health issues. I love this that I found. I'm healing out loud because I nearly died in silence. And so I am out loud about my journey. And my journey has been really successful, and there still are days that I feel overwhelmed. But I know that those are just moments. They, as my sister says, they can be the end of a chapter. They don't have to be the end of a book. And the other definition that I learned early in recovery is the definition of the word surrender. Now, a lot of us think of surrender as giving up the ghost or throwing in the towel or admitting defeat. I can't do this. That's not actually what surrender means. Surrender, as I learned it in recovery, is to go over to the winning side, to actually put yourself in the care of those who are winning. I hadn't done that. I had resented the people who were getting it. I was annoyed at the people who were recovering and they were announcing day counts and month counts and year counts. But I realized that I really had to surrender. I had to step into what's working for other people and let them guide me. Let them help me to surrender and to be able to do that. So, how did I do it? What does that look like? In the rooms of recovery, we often say, you don't have to really change anything. You have to change everything. So I literally had to change where I lived, where I worked, who I was around. I really had to look at that. And I began to recognize there was a real power in daily practices. There's an incredible power in daily practices. And I'm going to share some of those with you today and invite you to think about what you could take on as a daily practice. Mental hygiene is kind of like dental hygiene, as we put in the description of today's talk. It takes a daily routine to maintain it, and if you do just a little bit of it, it goes a long way. And so here are some steps I've taken around mental hygiene. I do a gratitude list, try to do one every day. I do a gratitude list, and I have about 5 or 6 people that I share it with. That is what I'm grateful for. And sometimes it's inane things, and sometimes it's my husband, my kids, my cuddles. It just depends on where I'm at the moment. The second thing that I do, and a couple of you have received these from time to time, I do not get to start email in the morning until I have sent one email to acknowledge somebody for something from the day before. And the subject, now you're all gonna be, well, where's mine? When am I gonna get one of those? But I start them all with great thanks for, because when I'm having a bad day, I can go to email and I can just search all of the things I've sent to different people, and it brings me back to that spirit of gratitude. I still hold on to the rock ceremony that we had at the beginning of the year. Actually, mine has influence on one side, because that's the unity goal, and gusto on the other side. Gusto is my personal goal. It's also part of my password to get into my computer, but I added a bunch of nonsense to it. Don't worry, I'm not at risk telling you that. But for me, gusto is to live with grace, understanding, serenity, tenacity, and openness. Grace, understanding, serenity, tenacity, and openness. And that's what I have built my year around this year. And then I meditate. Maybe once a week, I join the Zoom meditations that we do over the lunch hour. I use the meditation app. I will just meditate in traffic. I've learned simple ways to just take the power of the pause. A few weeks ago here on a Friday night, we had a session on the power of the pause, and there were 5 great speakers that talked about how they were only able to move forward in what they were doing if they paused before they moved forward. If you haven't seen those talks, I invite you to go to the Unity YouTube channel and look at those, because there is an incredible power in being able to slow down and take the power of the pause. And I do my level best to keep my commitments and my promises visible in front of me. So my rock is usually always right below my computer as a paperweight. The other trick that I have, I'll get to the trick in 1 minute. Before I go there, I got to spend some time with Richard Rohr. He's an amazing Franciscan priest. And he reminds me that if we do not transform our pain, we most assuredly will transmit it. Usually to those closest to us, our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, and invariably the most vulnerable, our children. If I want to be reminded of the power of stepping out of my depression, my anxiety, my suicidal ideation, and into life, I just need to look in the eyes of Joshua, if I can catch him, or the eyes of Roma. or the eyes of Toby. Because I have the power to generationally break this. And so I keep my commitments visible to me. Here's a few ways that I do that. Every week I do a KISS of the week that I just finished. KISS doesn't stand for keep it simple, stupid. Like a lot of people, that's the acronym. For me, it's what do I want to keep, improve, start, and stop. And so just in my calendar, at the end of the week, I just do a quick KISS list. What do I keep, improve, start, and stop? And I see that every week. Every weekend here on Sundays, we do a commitment, and it looks like that on the screen. And then in your bulletin or online, you are able to do this. We make our own commitments. And we now have it where you can take it home in the bulletin because you tear it off and drop it in the collection. I take a photo of it. And I have that photo as a part of my screensaver to just remind me, what did I say on Sunday that I was going to, because by Tuesday, sometimes by Sunday night, it is out of my mind. And so none of these in and of themselves keep me sober and keep me free from depression, but all of them together allow me to step into a life 24 hours at a time, day by day, that lets me step into the sobriety and the sanity that's available to me and remind myself that I can look back at the past, I can look forward at the future, but I want to stay engaged in the present. And for me, that present is sobriety, it's sanity, and it's serenity.